Welcome to this explainer. Go ahead and grab your mental hard hats, because today we're putting on our theoretical physicist hats and, well, completely upending everything we thought we knew about the Big Bang. We're going to dive deep into what's called the absolute medium model. It's a framework that reveals our universe isn't some expanding balloon that just magically popped out of a tiny singularity. Nope, it's actually a dynamic, fluid, elastic machine, literally a universe governed by mechanical tension, structural failure, and determinal self-repair. It is absolutely fascinating. Here's our roadmap for today's journey. We'll start off with rethinking the Big Bang, then move into a catastrophic event known as the cosmic fall. After that, we'll examine matter as primordial fossils, explore the cosmic tension net, and finally wrap up with the immortal cosmic engine. All right, Section 1, Rethinking the Big Bang. Let's tackle the very first major hurdle in cosmology. To really get this, we have to move away from this deeply ingrained kind of dualistic idea that space is just an empty container holding separate pieces of matter. You know the standard story, right? It asks us to accept a zero-dimensional mathematical singularity, something with infinite density that just inexplicably exploded into a passive, empty void. But the absolute medium model, it totally eliminates the mathematical impossibility of those point singularities. Instead of an explosion creating space, the genesis event is a universal decompression. It's a physical phase transition within a single continuous medium that was already there. And this brings us to a really cool concept called structural monism. Basically, we have to ditch the magic of empty space. The universe doesn't have an independent background vacuum. The continuum itself, the actual fabric of reality, is the matter, and it is the elastic tension stretching between that matter. The universe is entirely self-contained within its own architecture. To put it simply, there is no empty stage holding the actors. The actors are holding hands, and they are the stage. So Section 2, the cosmic fall. If there wasn't a singularity, what actually happened? Well, let's look at this number, 10 to the 59th power joules per cubic meter. It's a staggering, almost incomprehensible number. In this framework, this represents the ultimate folding modulus. Before our universe existed as it does now, it was a continuum stretched uniformly to its absolute maximum limit. This number is the absolute maximum elastic tension that this hyper-stiff primordial monolith could hold before the entire structural logic of the field was violently forced to just snap. Think of the primordial universe like a highly tensioned pane of tempered glass. Now, when a localized fracture happens in tempered glass, it doesn't just break in one tiny spot, right? The structural integrity is compromised everywhere all at once, and it shatters across its entire volume almost instantaneously. That is exactly what the cosmic fall was, an ultra-fast, universe-wide structural failure, where this hyperdense tension net suddenly fractured. So the huge takeaway here is that the Big Bang was absolutely not an expansion from a tiny dot. It was a universal decompression. It was the catastrophic structural relaxation of a superdense, highly tensioned net. All that tension dropped from that staggering 10 to the 59th joules, down by roughly 69 orders of magnitude, to the relaxed baseline tension that we observe today. But as you'll see, this relaxation wasn't perfectly clean. Which brings us to Section 3, Matter as Primordial Fossils. This is where things get really wild. Think about this profound question for a second. If the universe is just a snapped, relaxed tension net, and we can't synthesize matter out of an empty void because the void doesn't actually exist, then what exactly is the true mechanical nature of a particle? Where did the stars, the galaxies, and where did we actually come from? Remember how I said the relaxation wasn't perfectly clean? When that tempered glass of the early universe shattered and relaxed, trillions of localized, microscopic droplets of the medium actually failed to relax. They became topologically isolated. These are the nodes, what we call baryonic matter. They are literally tiny, hyperdense, primordial fossils stranded in a newly relaxed ocean. The rest of the universe? Those are the tension lines. That's the relaxed, ambient, elastic strains stretching across the vast distances between these unfallen droplets. So particles weren't created from nothing. They are the frozen leftovers of the pre-universe. But here's the catch. These hyper-dense fossils were suddenly surrounded by a really low-pressure, relaxed medium. To avoid just dissolving into the background, the trapped kinetic energy inside these cores violently redirected into angular momentum. They aggressively puffed out these fluid dynamic exclusion zones, active skins, basically. Imagine trillions of these isolated cores simultaneously inflating these skins.
It created an infinite pressure differential, resulting in a colossal kinematic shoving match. This aggregate outward displacement pressure is the actual mechanical engine driving cosmic expansion. The universe isn't just empty space stretching, it's particles physically shoving the fluid medium outward.
Moving right along to Section 4, the cosmic tension net. Let's see how this builds into the macro structure of our reality.
The standard vacuum model forces us to invent all these invisible patches, right? Dark matter, dark energy. We use them to mathematically explain why the universe remains geometrically flat and how it expands. But the absolute medium framework, it completely replaces the need for that. It functions deterministically as a macroscopically taut energetic web. The flatness of our universe isn't a coincidence. It's a mandatory, self-regulating fluid dynamic equilibrium. It's strictly maintained by the mass of the cosmos pulling elastically against its own outward kinematic expansion. And it is honestly amazing how perfectly this tensioned web maps to the physics we observe every day. First, the speed of light. It isn't magic, it's exactly like a wave traveling across a perfectly tuned snare drum. It is simply the vibration limit of our taut cosmic web. Second, the cosmic microwave background. That isn't the leftover heat of a singularity. It's the chaotic, crisscrossed, degraded fluid dynamic wake left over from that initial shattering. And third, gravity isn't some invisible bend in empty geometry. It is the advective flow of the relaxed net continuously trying to pull itself back together toward those unfallen nodes.
Now, you might be wondering, why doesn't the expansion just rip apart forever? Well, enter a concept we call the inverse egg. Think of a normal biological egg, a rigid shell enclosing a fluid interior. The universe is the exact inverse of that. As the kinematic shock front of our expanding bubble pushes outward, it plows into the unfallen, infinitely stiff block of the primordial omni-universe. This collision mathematically forces a hyper-rigid boundary shell to form. This shell dynamically contains the internal tension net, basically enforcing that absolute structural flatness we observe.
Okay, Section 5, the immortal cosmic engine. Let's talk about what this all means for the ultimate fate of our universe.
We are living inside a highly structured, self-contained machine, and this entire fluid elastic ecosystem operates on what are known as the 8 axioms of persistence. Now, I'm not going to bore you by reading through all 8 of these right now, but I want you to focus on the core mechanics here. Basically, there are hard, physical limits on how much strain this net can take. When those limits are breached, the net physically snaps to preserve its admissibility. It is a fully deterministic, built-in defense mechanism against mathematical singularities.
And these axioms manifest in a process called continuous genesis. It's a 4-phase cycle that operates exactly like an immortal mechanical clock. Step 1 is genesis. Extreme kinetic waves creatively interfere, buckling the net and tying new knots of mass. Step 2, aggregation. The gravitational flow of the net clumps these knots together. Think stars and galaxies. Step 3, compression. Those stars die and collapse, squeezing the knots together until they form supermassive black holes. And finally, step 4, rupture. The black hole hits its absolute structural limit and bursts, recycling all that trapped fluid elastic energy back into the net to trigger genesis all over again. Recycling, clumping, squeezing, bursting. Which leads us to this incredibly profound realization. The cosmos is neither a dying machine nor a finite reservoir. It is an eternal, self-sustaining fluid elastic ecosystem. We are not spiraling toward a cold, dead, empty end. The universe is a self-healing web of creation and destruction, constantly tying and untying itself at the absolute physical limits of its tension. So, I want to leave you with this final, mind-bending thought today. If our observable universe is just one expanding bubble of relaxation, dynamically unspooling itself while encased in a hyper-rigid shock front against an infinitely stiff primordial block, what other unfallen structures or bubbles might exist out there in the greater omniverse? Keep your curiosity elastic, folks, and until next time, keep questioning the very fabric of reality.